Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ice Cold Takes podcast. I am your host, Joey DeMeglio. Free agency began on Monday, and the Rangers were extremely quiet as they only made two moves the first day. One signing, one trade. Sam Carrick was the signing. Riley Smith, they traded for from the Pittsburgh Penguins. We have a lot to talk about in terms of the salary cap for the Rangers with my guest. Speaking of which, today's episode is the annual appearance of the Hockeystatminer from Twitter/X. HSM, welcome back to the show. You're on the phone. How's your summer going?
Oh, it's going. We usually do this in June, so we're a little late this year. So I think that's why things are so screwed up. If
Yeah.
you just had if you just had me last week, none of this would have happened.
Yeah. Yep. But I mean, we wouldn't be able to talk about um the Truba discourse, which we were just doing. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I mean, like overall, how free agency went the first day. Was that to be expected, or did you expect the Rangers to make some more moves?
Well, it's kind of like I could see why Drury would run it back, right? The team won the President's Trophy. They made a deep run. They run into a better team, but it's kind of funny. If you asked Rangers fans like when we were up 3-0 against Carolina, like, oh hey, what if you bring Rangers can bring 95% of this team back next year? Like, is that good? Yeah, it's awesome. Obviously that quickly changed when they were finally ran up against a better team in Florida. But I always thought that could be the thing, even as the Florida series played out, just because of kind of how tied into this roster they are. I mean, this year and next summer they're really tied in. So it would have to be bold changes, true of a thing, or kind of run it back again, and maybe in a sense do something different at next deadline, assuming this roster stays as good or generally as good as it was. So I did, going into this whole thing, I did think running it back was a decent possibility, whether you find that to be wise or not. But then, yeah, the whole Trouba stuff happened, and it became a quick mess.
Of course, as of now, Truba is still on the roster. I'm fully expecting him to be on the roster throughout uh, until the new season begins, at least until next off season. But in terms of running it back, one big change that the Rangers made was waiving Barclay Goodrow. How do
Mm.
you view that? What were your thoughts on how Drury handled that, placing an alternate captain on waivers? Because I know there's been a lot of talk from some of the reporters about how that might have affected the dressing room.
I mean, yeah, I have no doubt that Goodrow was valued in the locker room or whatever. I mean, we don't really know these things, but it seems like a good bet. But on the other hand, for a team this kind of already set in its cap ways, if you're looking for any money to say go get a Riley Smith or whatever, Goodrow kind of was the way to cut, because he was getting 3.6 or whatever it was. They signed him kind of hoping he could commandeer the third line. That never really happened. And just generally speaking, as hot as he ran in the playoffs, uh, 3.6 for a fourth line guy when the Rangers are facing what they're facing this, not only this summer but next summer especially. That's kind of like a really easy way to cut. So whether it's Goodrow, whether it's true, but there is kind of a business aspect to this.
I know how infuriating it was when he signed that contract initially, Goudreau. Talk how you and other people have talked about, how hard it would be to move that contract. Ultimately, I find it hilarious that what people were saying in the beginning just somehow, some way seemed to make sense, and an NHL GM was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll take those intangibles. Just give me the I'll take the contract."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, to fend against revisionist history, right? When Goodrow signed that deal, I mean, you got to think about the context. Like the Tom Wilson incident had just happened,
Right.
so there was new ownership. So there was not only this kind of impetus to kind of bulk up and get a little more physical, but there was a new administration that kind of, as new administrations do, they kind of have this blank check vibe going, that everything they're dealing with they inherited. But yeah, a big talking point was Goodrow coming off his double cup wins in Tampa was like, oh yeah, Rangers will get him and they can move him at any point because GMs love him. And then 3 years later, and it's like, wow, Drury's a genius for losing him for nothing. It's it's funny how these narratives will come and go, and then their history will very quickly get revised with these things. And when it comes to Ranger stuff, especially when it comes to like just this nerdy stuff, I remember the summer of 2021 very, very well. That was a tough one.
I remember following that on Twitter. I remember that. That was when Ice Cold Takes was only a year old. Baby Ice Cold Takes. But anyways, do you think, back to July 1st of 2024, was it a good move for Drury to stay away from the remaining high-priced free agents on July 1st after Gensel had gone and Kane had re-signed with the Red Wings? Do you think that was a good idea?
Yeah, so a couple of things here. With this whole Trouba thing in the air, it's hard to know how much cap space like Drury was operating with. Like if he thought, if he's committed to Trouba being a goner, then he has more money to play with. But if Trouba's staying, then he obviously has a lot less. So it's hard to tell. Like usually by July 1st, we kind of know how much money the Rangers have to do whatever they're going to do. This was kind of a weird year where it's like, what's happening? So it's kind of hard to evaluate on that. Number two, there was a lot of, as free agency usually is, it's kind of getting back to normal. Like nature is healing. There was a lot of deals there. It's like, wow, that's a lot of money for. And I think that's really a product of not only the flat cap era ending, but now we're at the point where it's like if the salary cap goes up 4 or 5%, that's 4 or 5 million at this point. I mean, it's going to hit 100 million probably in a couple of years.
Fairly soon.
Small increases now are nominally equal to like some of the biggest increases we've seen in the entire cap era. So I think you sort of had the market reacting to that. Not that free agency is usually cost effective, but yeah. So I'm okay with. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that Drury didn't go out and get a whole lot because I don't know how many of those deals would have worked with what we have. And really, the big thing in all this is next summer is kind of stacked to be a really, really interesting summer in terms of what the Rangers have to do to stay under the cap, but also how are they going to do it? So just to go through it real quick, next summer, like July 1st, 2025, right? So let's just go through the list. Cooley's going to be up for a raise, most likely. Rempe's contract is up. Kako's contract is up. You have Lafreniere and Miller, who are arbitration eligible. They'll be up for a raise. And of course, Igor Shesterkin, probably going to like double his salary. So that's like a lot of demand for money that's going to have to be paid in. The only problem is there's really no money coming off the books as of now, like in place, like as in terms of placeholder. Mika's still here, Panarin's still here, Fox is still here, Kreider's still here, Trouba's still here in theory. So next summer, really kind of the writing's on the wall where there's going to be a lot of people demanding raises, and there's all the big contracts. Now that Goodrow's gone, there's really no easy way to cut, like quote unquote easy, for any of this big money. So even if you look at like a 2-year, $8 million deal or whatever for a right winger that you liked, that's still going to come into play on top of all that. So with that in mind, it's relative. It's what is Drury going to do? What is the plan? Not only to ice the best roster you can this year and go in the playoffs on the best run you can, but what the hell are you going to do next year if you're adding on top of everything I just talked about? So all of that is just messy, and I really don't think it's the worst thing in the world. In theory, that Drury was a little quiet, and I have mentioned this before. Running it back and kind of maybe taking a bolder stance at the trade deadline next year than they did this year, that might be the way to go, just because that's the only way to go. That's the only way to make the money work.
You mentioned that a lot of the decisions for July 1st stemmed on, whether Trouba was or was not going to be on the roster, and that cap space, that $8 million coming off the books or staying. So I'm just assuming you think that the inability to move him hampered the Rangers and Drury in making other moves? Like, that decision was still on their minds, that it put everything else on the back burner?
Well, if they traded, Trouba at the draft or whatever, I think it's kind of like a whole new reality. Like you'd have more money to spend, and then Trouba would be gone, so that everything I talked about next summer, that's $8 million later, or $6 million or whatever, if they retain salary. If you go and buy that Detroit trade that Larry talked about, yeah, that that would change things, obviously. But the fact that it didn't, I don't know, it's just weird to me. It's very odd. Because if you take that, like the Detroit trade that Larry Brooks talked about in the New York Post, he was talking about what, like 30-something% retained, or like 2.5 million dead
Yeah.
cap space the
It was
next 2 years.
yeah,
Was it something like that, right?
2.5 million. It was gonna be
Yeah.
Trouba at $5.5 million, so that's 2.5 million.
Yeah. Well, if you buy him out, that's 4 million a year. And granted, there's a little more dead cap, you know, 2 years after that. But it's like, if you're, I mean, who knows what the return? If there's going to be a meaningful return, I guess that changes things. I mean, who knows in the NHL? But if you're content to have 2.5 years dead space the next 2 years, why wouldn't 4 million isn't much different, and then you could at least do something where it's like, Jacob, we're going to try and trade you, and if we can't trade you, we're going to buy you out June 30th. Some sort of hard line like that it seems like it would have made more sense to me than if they are really, if they were, I should say, trying to rid themselves of that Trouba money. That just seems like the way to go for me. I
A
mean, because
buyout?
then you would at least know what you have heading into July 1st, whether you're whatever's going on, at least you know. But the not knowing how messy this whole situation is, I mean, it's hard enough to operate like free agency and like do a not terrible job, but like when you have just incomplete information,
Mhm.
it's just so it's just weird to me. It's so strange. It's either like way mishandled or way blown out of proportion. Like it can't be like a middle ground there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess it could be, but it doesn't make any sense to
So
me.
you're saying that a buyout would still be, like, feasible at this point?
If you're
Maybe not
if you're
right now, but now that
right,
everything is out in the open.
well, if
But
you're Drury
yeah, go
and
ahead.
if you're Drury and you are like destined to shed yourself a Trouba, and again, we don't know what the return was going to be on that Detroit trade, but if you're Drury and you're destined to get Trouba off your roster to make room for bigger and better things or whatever, 2.5 million dead space versus $4 million dead space. That's like not the worst jump. I mean, was he getting something back? And then it's like, okay, then that makes sense. If you're getting something back and it's 1.5
Yeah.
million less dead space, that's a bigger jump. But it just seems so odd to me. I don't know. This whole thing is just so weird.
Which would make the Brooks article make people even more upset at that, if there was something coming back, because we're just like, this is just terrible asset management again. Like, I mean, I know you can't fault Drury for this contract because he didn't give it to him. It was Jeff Gorton and it was pre-COVID. And, we figured the cap was gonna be at this point, you know,
Sure. Yeah.
back
No.
like it was gonna project up steadily to this point, like, years ago, and it just never happened because of COVID, unfortunately. Um, but, having that in the let's put that aside, like, the Trouba discourse aside. Another thing that has been really ticking off a lot of people, and now I'm just really starting to realize how big that Buchnevich trade is years ago. Like, it never really hit me until right now that 3 years after, the Rangers are still trying to replace him, and they cannot do it. This Riley Smith trade, is this a move for the first line right wing spot, or is this ideally a third line right wing spot and putting Kako up on the top line?
Oh boy. Yeah. You know, you know how to get under my skin. Um, So, a couple of things. I I really don't. I'm not the biggest fan of like pinpointing lines, like line combos at this point. For me, it's kind of like just kind of like throw a group out there, and then you'll work it out at training camp. You can kind of be aware of like different roles. This guy's a penalty killer. This guy's good on the power play. Things of that nature. This guy's AHL ready to make the jump, and we'll see. We'll shelter his ice time. But I really do. I'm not a big fan of pinpointing lines. Like, is Smith going to be a one right wing or a two right wing or a three right wing? And frankly, from what it looks like, I think at this point, the Rangers are going to show up with a bunch of right wingers and just kind of throw them out there and see what sticks. I mean, what else can you do? If Kako gets a chance with Kreider and Zibanejad, can he click? The underlying metrics were pretty favorable for him. He just, they just couldn't finish. Whether it's puck luck, whether it's the metrics are flawed and Kako's not as good. But you'd think that if he's still there, he's going to get a shot. Riley Smith is the same. You're going to try everything, right? You're going to try things. If they don't work, you'll move them around. So I just think of it as, and then you have Offman too. I mean, is Brendan Offman, going to make the jump or not? That's kind of an iffy thing. So you just show up to the roster. You have Kako. Presumably Laff is going to keep playing right on the right side. Then you have Kako, Smith, maybe Offman. Then you have VZ, Rempe, Brodzinski on the bottom. So I don't know how the lines are going to work out, but that seems to be, for the fourth year in a row, we're just going to throw things on the right side. And probably what's going to end up happening is if the Rangers are in the playoff spot and they have cap space at the deadline, we're going to be talking about, okay, how can they beef up the right side? Because center, they have options. Left side, they have options. It's Groundhog Day.
I know people in the Rangers side of the analytics community might, point their swords at me if I say break up Kreider and Zibanejad, because I know their underlying metrics are pretty solid. Like, defensively, nothing happens when they're out there. Like, they don't give up much, especially when Kakko is there. I did look at the analytics. I've seen them. They are very good, but it's just the offense that's, for a top line, or what's considered a top line, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I'm wondering, is it time to like split them up? Because we really haven't seen like an extended look at what they would look like, aside from last season with Gerard Gallant, like a time in like December, early January, where they went, Kreider, Trocheck, and then Panarin, Zibanejad. I'm interested to see how it would work with like a Panarin, Zibanejad, Kakko, or Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere, something like that. But am I just, too far out there, or should I just have more faith in Kakko that he'll get it done, or should I have faith and hope that Brennan Othman should come up and play on the right side like Lafreniere did this season, switch over?
Yeah, so I mean, these are questions that Laviolette and the coaching staff are going to have to deal with. I would say that Wheeler did them no favors on that side, right? Roslovic, as much flack as Roslovic gets, I think they did decently well with him, at least in the regular season. I think anything's on the table. I really, if you can't address the right side like you wanted to, or you plan to, or whatever, as I was saying, throw a bunch of right wingers on the right side and see what happens. Everything should be up for grabs. So I'm open to it. I'm open to like experimenting with the combos, and then if it works, stick with it. If it doesn't, try something new. That's as much expertise as I can offer. But yeah, I'm not married to Kreider and Zibanejad have to be together. I mean, they'll make cool plays where it's like, oh yeah, like you can only make that if you played with someone for years.
Right.
But overall, at what point is like this sort of glaring right wing vacancy of breaking them up should be absolutely on the table. Anytime breaking up any line should be on the table if you can get something better, through the sum of their parts.
Right. There shouldn't be like, boxed and have like tunnel vision or anything. I understand that. One other thing too is the bottom 6. There was a lot of guys in free agency that were available, like Michael Amadio, Warren Fogle, Blake Lizotte, forwards, and they got some pretty good contracts considering all the other bad contracts that were handed out. Do you think it was a
Mm.
mistake to not for Drury to not go after bottom 6 help considering what was available?
Um,
Or would you have stayed aw I know you know more about the salary cap and stuff. Would you have stayed away from those contracts because of term or something like that?
yeah, I mean that like I was just saying with Goodrow, like this team's kind of really like really on the edge as much as they can fit, and then if they get when you have to cut like any bottom guy that's making more than bottom money, that's like the first place you're going to cut, as we saw with Goodrow. But the other side is there is like kind of this bargain bin effect of free agency. There's going to be guys that missed out on the boat. They missed out on the musical chairs, and for whatever reason, they're going to be available. Kind of at the sort of second wave and the third wave of free agency. And so there, you would think that getting a serviceable fourth liner, getting a serviceable third pair guy, that should be replaceable. I mean, that should be something that you don't struggle to get in the market. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Uh, Depending on how things go. If Truba is somehow departed between now and the season, and then you have Jones slide up to third pair, you have Schneider slide up to second pair. You sort of have to like replace you have to find like a 6-7 guy, and I think that'll work. You can do that like in late July, probably. Uh, but yeah, there's no fourth line or third pair guy that I desperately wanted that obviously I didn't get, because in theory there's all you need is someone decent and someone cheap, and that should be replaceable enough.
There was guys that were available that had really good 5-on-5 analytics, like Blake Lizotte he got less than $2 million for 2 years, like, I mean, to me, that one screams out, like, I would rather have that than I would spend the extra, what is it, 850K for 2 years to over, uh, who do we get? Sam Carrick. Uh,
Yeah.
I would rather have that, to be honest. Like, I understand they needed a Goudreau replacement and they wanted to go really cheap.
Mm.
Um, I I guess it really is that tight then for next season.
Well, the other thing is like you have like Edstrom, you have Rempe, maybe you have Berard. Like I think bottom six, like you can have enough. There's probably enough like graduation equity in the pot where like you can maybe get some fourth liners for that you're going to grow. But it's the fourth line. You have VZ obviously. I don't know. There's that's replace like quote unquote replacing Goodrow. Like I get it, but it's also like they got bigger fish to fry. Like they haven't theoretically replaced Gustafsson yet. You know what I mean? How's that going to play
Mhm.
out? So
Yeah, you mentioned, like, the younger guys like VZ. He's still a young guy in my head. R R like Kreider, forever a rookie. Rempe, Edstrom, Jones, you mentioned before, and Drury also after the Rangers got eliminated in his presser, he was saying that, they were looking at the internal replacements and, you're thinking like Berard or Othman or, a guy like Edstrom Rempe's had been there playing in the playoffs. Um, I would be really excited to see guys like that take the next step, maybe get some games, but I don't know how much of it comes down to preseason and if those guys could even win spots out. Like Berard, I'm looking at and almost like the position that Cooley was in heading into this season, where it was like, all right, he looks really good. Let's see if he can make the jump. I don't know if he could make the team out of camp, but we'll see what happens. Are you in the same boat as me, or do you feel like Berard can't make it?
I mean, I guess they could. Broad had a really good year. I didn't watch Hartford, but like
Yeah,
I
neither
I
did I,
forget
but I know he had a good year. Yes.
I forget the stat, but it's like between Othman and Berard, God, it's like if you look at AHL rookies in something like Berard and Othman were in the top 5, and like in all of the cap era, the Rangers have never had more than one rookie. Was it points? Maybe I don't know, but yeah, there's a little something bubbling, probably third line, fourth line stuff in Hartford. But the big thing is the replaceability. Like if getting a serviceable fourth line guy, like that shouldn't be a hard problem. That shouldn't be something that you miss out on per se. Like okay, maybe the best fourth liner, that's fine. Like that's something maybe you'd want. But if you only get the 10th best fourth liner, I'm not sure like that's a huge gap, especially if you're paying 100,000s more for that first and the 10th. But even aside from that, we've talked about the bargain bin for agency. There's trades. Lord knows there's going to be waivers in October when kind of these 22, 23-year-old guys who can't quite make the roster. Teams will try and slip them into the minors. Hey, if you're the Rangers and you didn't address that problem, like you could be, the waiver picker, and it wouldn't be a big deal. So there's always options for that. Whether Edstrom and Berard and Rempe, like if those guys are really ready to graduate and you're happy with that, or you want to go find something else. I mean, Jimmy Vesey. Jimmy Vesey's a very serviceable fourth line guy, and he barely could make the NHL when they
Right.
invited him to
It's
camp and
PTO.
signed him to essentially a multi-year league minimum. Brodzinski. I would so much rather if the Rangers were settle everything else and then we can nitpick that, that'd be fine. But right now I'm thinking second pair. What's your second pair? What's the third line really going to look like here?
Yeah.
Things like that. So, and there's not much money to spend. Not only in this upcoming year, but especially kind of the shit's going to hit the fan next summer. So, I really wasn't too focused on that stuff, and it's just like, yeah, okay, give it, Edstrom, Berard, give him a chance. Take it from there.
So the Rangers still have Ryan Lindgren and Braden Schneider to re-sign, and then presumably another seventh defenseman. Assuming Trouba stays, those are your 6 defensemen: Fox, Trouba, Miller, Jones, Lindgren, and Schneider. How imperative is it that the Rangers keep it short term with Ryan Lindgren?
Yeah, so that's the whole thing, isn't it? Most of us have lived through the Girardi install extensions, right? That's the thing with Lindgren. Not only do they have an off year, he's like a 20-minute a game guy, first pair. Gets you 20 points. I think that's gonna. I would think that if he goes to salary arbitration, he's going to end up not far off from his qualifying offer. His qualifying offer was 3.6. I'm sort of using the placeholder as 3.75, kind of just give him a little raise. And I think that's where you're at if you're the Rangers. Because again, if you sign him to like a 2-year deal, anything over a year, add that money to the wall of next summer that we've been talking about. So yeah, I think Lindgren is going. I think the play for Lindgren is like he might go to arbitration. I think he'll certainly file. I mean, the deadline is what, Friday? So I think that's going to happen.
That was what I was going to ask you about next. Like, how does arbitration work, and can the Rangers purposely go to arbitration with the player to like purposely open another to open a buyout window for Trouba?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing here is they missed the boat on free agency essentially. Like if you buy out, yeah, okay, let's take this at a time. Yes, as soon as Ryan Lindgren files for arbitration on Friday, the Rangers are going to get a second buyout window. Even if Lindgren doesn't go to arbitration, Lindgren could file for arbitration and then immediately sign, a 1-year deal or something. As a matter of fact, if Lindgren files for arbitration and then immediately signs like a deal like hours later, that would be very interesting.
That would be telling,
because there's no one else they would buy out but Trouba. I mean, there's no one else.
No.
The other thing is, trades really can happen, and that is kind of the next step. It's like Rangers could have made a splash with free agency, fine. They still can do it with trades. And like just floating this out. if the Rangers buy out Trouba in the second window and now they have $4 million extra cap space, they could trade, who knows, and add, up to, let's just say, $4 million or whatever, probably 5. And those do happen. When the Rangers got Rick Nash, that was late July. When they got Zibanejad for Brassard, that was mid or late July.
Yeah.
Those do happen. I mean, it's not usually late July and August is kind of the quiet time for us hockey fans, but they do happen. I think Skinner. I feel like Skinner, the Buffalo Carolina trade for Skinner was also.
That was a summer
Yeah.
trade. I remember that.
I feel like that was like August 1st or something. Anyways, so that is kind of maybe like the, I don't know, not conspiracy theory, but like, if the Rangers are going to buy out Trouba in the second window, like you'd have to think that there's like some trade going on somewhere, because you're not going to buy out Trouba and then spend $4 million in free agency in, last weekend of July. Like, who are you going to spend it on? They're all gone.
Yeah, everybody's gone.
Yeah, so that is an interesting wrinkle in all this. Trades really, and Kakko. We thought Kakko might get traded at the draft. He might very well still get traded. So there are that is the one thing where I wouldn't say Drury missed the boat for sure, but yeah, as far as like the conventional how teams usually head into July 1st, yeah, that's gone.
Yeah, and do you think that they're going to go to arbitration, that Lindgren and the Rangers are going to go there? Because I know Saravalli was saying that Lindgren's ask on an extension he said it was reasonable. That was the word he used, reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I really do think that the Rangers are really going to be handcuffed by next summer, and they're going to, even if they want to do something with Lindgren, like lock him up long term, which I'm not convinced of.
Yeah.
You're just adding to this. You're making what you have to tear down that much harder next year. Granted, if you sign Lindgren to a 1-year deal now, he's going to be unrestricted next summer. But I could absolutely see this going 1 year. I really could.
A 1-year deal.
Yeah, and I don't know what you'll get in arbitration, because, and a lot of people don't know this, you can actually get less than your qualifying offer in arbitration. You can get up to 50% less. So they offered him 3.6. It really, 20. He had what, 19 points in 75 games, something like that.
Yeah, definitely not an offensive guy. Definitely more of a defensive guy. He's not going to provide you any offense.
And this is where it kind of comes to arbitration. Like, they will look at, obviously it's like, oh, points aren't everything on all that. But arbitration, there's a very, very carved out way of looking at things. Like it's like court. Like, there's like only certain evidence is allowed. And, obviously sort of the offensive oriented stuff is that. It's like that, and like, how much charity work do you do? Like, that's kind of where we're at. But hey, if you get an arbiter who kind of can appreciate the shutdownedness value that isn't showing up on box scores, who knows? There was a funny one where it's like, I'm reaching back for this one, but it's like, I remember the Thrashers got Clark MacArthur, and they went to arbitration.
Oh boy.
and the arbiter awarded them way more than they thought they would, and because he was kind of like a bottom six gritty guy. And it they clearly weren't expecting that, and they walked away, and like whatever they traded for him was lost because he became a free agent. So there's there's always funny things like that. But I could see this going 1 year. I don't know if it actually goes to arbitration. Obviously teams really don't want to do that, like make a case against the player.
That'll definitely raise some eyebrows, though, especially in Rangersville, with the Trouba stuff.
The long and the short of it, I mean, really, this is all we're talking about here. Is the Rangers have have planted their seeds. They've put a lot of money and not a lot of guys that are hard to move, that aren't going to start coming off the books until 2026. So all of this navigating, Trouba, Lindgren, even Schneider. I think if the Rangers were in another world where they were a lot more cap comfortable, I think we'd be talking a lot more about a long-term deal. like give him like $3 million a year for 3 or 4 years, something like that. I think that'd be something that would be, reasonable, palatable. But like that's like, in my mind at least, that's off the table because okay, you do that, and like next summer, that's just $3 more million that you've got to clear. As the Rangers really have to just as it stands now, they're going to have to cut a lot of salary next year, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So what they might do is they might just bridge them, or then and then just kind of wait on the pay raise. Not unlike, and that's kind of what they've been doing. I mean, Miller, Laugh. You
Go like
can't really
2 years.
you can't throw. I don't know how much it is. It's like 40% of the cap in like 6 guys or something like that. You can't do that and then give them all, no trade, no moves, and then kind of lock up your young guys as they age in their contracts at your leisure. You have to play the field, and as you said earlier, the flat cap era coming kind of on the aftermath of the Rangers rebuild. Not ideal, not ideal, but that's where we're at.
In terms of value, Trocheck's contract is really pulling a lot of weight here. Like that's, like the math wasn't working out, and now Trocheck is playing like a first line center, and you saw Zibanejad take a step back this season, so he's really pulling the weight there. But I'm interested to hear like your predictions for Lafreniere, Miller, Shesterkin. Like, do you think Shesterkin ultimately, like, his final asking price is what was it, like 14% of the cap? Whatever the cap's going to be. Was that what it was? 12.9 million, something like that?
I mean, that's what asking. I mean, we've all seen free agents, right? Like, you kind of like ask high, and the team offers low, and you meet in the middle. 14% would be relatively quite a bit, or not quite a bit, but more than what you would think. Like usually, if you can kind of look at like the best goalies that are kind of open market and what they sign for, it's like 10, 12. Granted, if you're Igor, you're like, oh, the cap's finally exploding, like we've been banking on all these years. So maybe you go a little a little higher, just because that the cap's going to go up so much. It's like it's going to be 10 or 12 in a few years. Like, hey, might as well get my 14 now. But no, I don't know. It's almost like I don't even know what next summer is going to be like, because we don't even know what this summer is yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That one will be interesting. And you're I don't know, how do you pronounce it? Yuri Slavkovsky. He just got a
Oh yeah,
it was 7 or 8 year extension, I believe, with Montreal. It was in the less than $8 million. So Lafreniere's got to be looking at that and thinking, yeah, I'm worth that. I'm worth more than that. Like at least a number that starts with an 8 or a 9.
Yeah, and the worst part is, Laugh's going to be arbitration eligible next summer, so he's going to have some leverage. But yeah, that just goes to show. I mean, teams with cap space and sort of their whole future ahead of them, they could do that. Rangers kind of, made their bed and they have to lie in it now. And the funny thing about Trocheck is, I think last year we talked about it, and we just talked about, like if the Rangers, because they were replacing Strome essentially, and it's like if they're going to go after a center and replace Strome and throw him a lot of money, that's going to be the last big free agent they're going to be able to do until they clear something out somewhere. That's just kind of how the math works out. So anytime. Yeah. So whether it's free agents or whether it's kind of extending Miller, Laugh, whoever, that's any big extension is going to have to come from somewhere. And then some, actually, because next summer is really it's going to be a buzzsaw.
I was going to ask you, like, is shedding Trouba's salary going to be enough? Like, what if it's a buyout or if they retain salary in a trade? Is that going to be enough?
I'd have to crunch the number, and it really depends on how you look at things. Like, what is Laugh going to get next year? What is Miller going to get next year? Kakko, if he's still with the team, like, what if he rebounds and all of a sudden his stock goes up? I mean, who knows? It's hard to predict the future, and a lot of that is going to be like how the hell they do this year. Obviously, can't predict the future, unfortunately. But it's. I think just by pretty much any estimate, they're like probably like anywhere from 2 to 4 million. Kind of over. If you assume the cap's going to grow 4 or 5%, they're still going to have to cut something somewhere, and that's not even. And that's also assuming Igor like doubles or whatever. So yeah, even with the cap increase, the Rangers are they stand to tread water, and any money you want to throw, whether it's a Schneider extension, Igor extension, Laugh, Miller, whatever they make, like that has to come from somewhere on top of whatever the difference is, like 2-3 million, whatever the hell it is.
If they could make it through 25, 26, then when Panarin's money comes off the books, like if they get through it, without having to gut one of their players, like let's say Trouba's not enough and they have to get rid of Hedel, that would not be good. Considering he's so young, but it's going to be the biggest breath of air, like sigh of relief, because he's not going to be asking for that again. Like if you're going to keep Panarin, he's definitely not asking for $11.6 million again. It's going to be a significant pay cut there.
Well, what if he has 100 points?
Yeah, at age 34, 100 points again, Hart Trophy. Man, what do you do? That's crazy.
The funny part is, like, it's this whole like rebuild till now has kind of been an exercise. Like Rangers rebuilt and they have all this cap space, and they really had all the options in the world. I mean, gosh, I remember like the 2022 deadline. They had more deadline cap space than like all the other East teams
And
combined.
I remember you constantly saying that.
Yeah,
if any year was the year to go all in, it was going to be that one.
Yeah, it's kind of like your senior year in high school. It's kind of like you kind of know like this is the last the last farewell before things change dramatically. So yeah, if we can get past that, and then Panarin comes off the books, Trouba's last year, like obviously a buyout or whatever, will be a lot more palatable. If his wife's residency is finished and he's the personal complications of a trade like are less pronounced, let's just say. All that stuff. Yeah, we would be having such a different conversation if the Rangers like had room to breathe, but they don't for the, I don't know, what, second or third year in a row.
We have reached the end here of this recording session, but I have one last segment here. I don't know if I started doing this when you came on last time. I don't remember.
I was drunk last time. I don't remember either.
Well, that puts a wrap on that. But I do the ice cold take segment of the show. So you have to make an accurate statement. This is the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of the ice cold take. It's an accurate statement backed by facts and observations that is solid in nature, similar to a block of ice, i.e., a spot-on claim. HSM, embrace your inner Colin Stevenson and give me something good, something you think is going to happen, like either next year, the following year. If you have a contract prediction, like exact terms or whatever for a player, now is your chance.
Oh man, for like the Rangers or any player?
If you could do it for the Rangers, that would be great.
Like an unpopular opinion is what you're asking me. Like an unpopular opinion that might turn out okay.
Yeah, you're just doing it on ice cold take, so we call it an ice cold take, but no one needs to know that.
Oh, okay. Here's one. Here's my like favorite little conspiracy theory, right?
Okay.
I predict that they're gonna give Will Cooley. I'm not okay. I wouldn't predict it normally, but you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Go with it.
Rangers. They're gonna give Will Cooley an extension out of nowhere. That's gonna be slightly generous, but even if you overpay Will Cooley, it's not gonna be the end of the world in terms of like salary cap. They're gonna do that before the season starts. The cutoff is now. It's going to be sort of a handshake agreement where it's like, okay, well, we gave you, a buck, 1.75 million or whatever, early, unprompted. Da, da, da. What we're going to do is we're going to bury you in Hartford whenever we're not playing, so that we enter the 2025 trade deadline with maximum cap space. And it's going to it's going to skimp your salary. If you don't know, if you're on a two-way contract like Cooley is, every day you're in Hartford, you make a couple $100. Every day you're on the varsity roster, you make a couple $1,000 or whatever. So it's a big pay cut. It's a very kind of ruthless way to generate cap space, but they are going to extend him, give him a nice, generous extension with this understanding. And then this whole, there's going to be this whole October thing where it's like, why are they sending down Cooley? Like, 5 times a week, and it's like, listen to this podcast. You know, that's my freezing Neptune surface take.
Man, that's got to be like the most on-brand ice cold take ever. I always see you talking about how Jury's got to send these guys down on the off days to accrue cap space, the maximum. It's like, oh my gosh, these paper transactions every day. This guy's got to. At least Jury should be paying for his taxi fare, his Uber ride, or Lyft, whatever you prefer.
Let me set the record straight. All right, let me set the record straight. During the shortened season, when there was like the taxi squad thing, they were doing that ruthless. I know that wasn't Jury, but they were doing it ruthlessly.
Yes,
with just Shesterkin, Kako, not Laugh, but they were doing that ruthlessly. Now I kind of throw it out there a lot because I'm a big cap space nerd, and what else am I going to do with my time? But yeah, Jury. That's the weird thing with Jury. Like, he will dress 16 players in a game to get like Kane and Tarasenko, but he won't like. Oh, we have 6 days till our next game, like, and 8 players we can send to the minors in between. No, he won't do that. So, a bit of an enigma, bit of a learning curve, but he'll listen to this and he'll plagiarize my idea, and it'll be okay.
Yeah, there you go. Ooh, I gotta make my ice cold take. I don't know, man.
Yeah, what's
Oh
yours?
man. Yeah, I said last week. This is melted by now already. I said Hedel, Kako, and Trouba were not going to be on the team at the start of the season. That's definitely not happening now.
Ooh.
Now they're running it back with all 3 of them for sure. Now that it's pretty set in stone that Trouba's not going anywhere this offseason, unless we see that Lindgren goes to arbitration, then you might see the buyout. I don't know.
Actually, no, that's just my whole take. Lindgren files for arbitration and then immediately signs an extension, and then Trouba, however, gets bought out.
That's a good one too.
That was the softball that I missed. Forget the Cooley thing.
The Cooley one is cool. I like that because it's on brand with you. Like, that's all you talk about nonstop.
It's small, but you know what? Those pennies add up by the time the deadline shows up.
It does. Oh my gosh. I remember following that last season, the 22-23 season. It's like every day it was like, all right, the Rangers have 23 forwards. Why they still have 23 forwards and not accruing any cap space for like the first month or 2 of the season. And then they finally traded Reeves. And it's like, oh, finally, at least we could accrue some cap space.
No, they acquired Tarasenko and Kane and like had like half a roster, and it's like, you idiot, like, you just do this in October and that's it, and then like you'd be fine.
Yeah, that was some of like the most pain-inducing, like, watching the Rangers, like, and they were playing well at that time too. Like, they were winning through that, and I'm like, man, what they're doing is insane. Like,
that game against the Kings was nuts. I was like, how are they doing this? Like,
yeah,
how are they winning with half the roster?
Yeah, I was like watching in awe, like, as they were doing that. That was.
But I was also gritting my teeth because like this is like super gratuitous, but they called up Carpenter and someone else, and like they didn't play them at all, and like broadcasters didn't know what was going on, so they were like, oh, like, if someone doesn't play a shift, like, they don't count against the cap, which is not true. And I was like losing my mind in my sad, nerdy little world.
I do remember something like that. They had to play in the game, right?
That's what they were saying, but that's not true at all. No, it's like, who's on your roster at 5 p.m. Then they count. Doesn't matter what they do or don't.
They didn't need to be in the lineup. They just needed to be on the roster at 5 p.m.
Right.
Okay.
And but they don't want to say it, but they didn't play them because if they get hurt, they can't bury them in Hartford the next day, which they were going to do. But like, the broadcasters didn't want to like get into all that, or they didn't know. And I was like, oh, I've been waiting my whole life for this. Like, this is what's happening.
I'm gonna do your ice cold take, the softball, the one that you should have done. I'm gonna say that, when's the deadline for arbitration?
I want to say it's Friday, July 5th. Yeah, it's either the 4th or the 5th. I think it's usually the 4th, but like this year it's the 5th.
All right, this is Milk Takes City.
Before the weekend, we'll know.
Okay, so if they don't come to an agreement on a contract, then it's arbitration, right?
If
they don't have an extension by Friday.
Well, in theory, Lindgren could not file and just not have a contract, but almost all the time, guys in his spot will file. Very rarely do people in his spot not file.
Okay. So I'm gonna say they file for arbitration.
That's a safe bet. Yeah.
Yeah, they file for arbitration and go to arbitration, make the deal, like within a day. I'll say within a day. You said hours. I'll say within a day, and with and then it opens up a 48-hour buyout window. Correct?
Uh, yeah, they would have. Well, the rule is it's like business days. So like the funny part is if Ling, and this is actually like Buchnevich stuff back in the day because like this happened on a Friday. But if Lindgren files for arbitration on a Friday and then signs the deal, I don't think that 48 window kicks in until Monday. Like I don't think it's like business day stuff. So
Puckpedia
yeah,
says if a team has a player go to arbitration and it is either settled or awarded, the team receives a new 48-hour buyout window beginning 3 days after the arbitration settlement or award.
but I think
Oh,
that's three. I think that's 3 business days. So if Lindgren were to file for arbitration and then immediately sign a deal, there'd be Saturday, Sunday, and then I think then the buffer would kick in. So it would be what, Wednesday to Friday of the next week. I think that's how it
yeah,
works.
Monday, Tuesday, and then Wednesday. Yeah, beginning 3 days
I
after
just
the yeah. So then
I,
if like within like the first minute of that opening that they say that the Truva thing's bought out, like that's what's happening. Lindgren's going to arbitration. They're gonna settle on make a deal immediately, and like once they do that, you're gonna know that Truva's getting bought out.
I mean,
As
why else would that? Yeah, why else would that fucking happen? Like that, the more immediate, the more spicy it would be. And
yeah.
I'm trying to like lay off Twitter this summer because like I've got things to do. But like if that happens, like that, all this weekend you're gonna see me posting shit like the nerdiest shit possible because that is spicy.
Yeah. Yeah, and considering like all the stuff that it happened, like all the stuff that I had to scroll through and the amount of gaslighting the media did for me, I was pissed. I was pissed about all this stuff. Like, man, like why are you getting mad at me for this thing that I'm not mad about? I'm not mad at this thing. Like that's like why is no one explaining? Why are these journalists not doing their jobs here? I'm sorry. Like I just graduated with my degree in journalism and man, I gotta call these people out. I'm barely even a journalist here. What are we doing here?
Just funny story. I remember this distinctly. Whatever the summer Buchnevich, he like filed for ARB, but then he signed his 2-year bridge. It had to be 2 years before he was traded, so like summer of 2019 or whatever. It was a Friday, and the whole thing was when does the buyout window open? And that's the summer I learned that it's like, oh, if like weekends don't count, like it has to be business days. So I
Oh,
know that's a thing. I know that's a thing. So actually, it's kind of bad they bring it up. The arbitration deadline being, I believe it's Friday. I don't think it's the 4th this year. I think it's the 5th. It's been the 4th before, but I think it's the 5th this year. But that's kind of a little wrinkle. But you know what? It probably won't matter. We're probably just shooting the shit right now, anyways.
yeah, yeah. I looked it up. It was July. It was a 2019 summer because
And you
he
know what? And the second buyout window mattered because that's when they bought out Shattenkirk, right?
Shattenkirk. I
Yeah,
was just thinking that. I remember Shattenkirk was pissed about that. He said he was not expecting that. I mean,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like any player that gets bought out is gonna have that reaction. Chris Drury himself was bought out. Remember
Well, you know what
that?
though? You know what though? To be fair though, if you get bought out like June 28th, like you still have a shot at like the July 1st market. But when you get bought out like in late July, like all
Like
the teams have spent,
at least
yeah,
Blake Wheeler had a chance to, sign with the
like all the
Rangers.
teams have spent their money. So you know what I mean? It's like it is kind of a, if you're a player getting bought out, you want to get bought out in the first window for
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
And
And you know, just one last note I want to throw out there now that we're really going down memory lane. All this Larry Brooks thing. I remember this is like the spectrum of Larry Brooks, the New York Post, right? I remember distinctly that like June 30th of 2017, it had to be. He was like, "Yeah, the Rangers are out on Shattenkirk," and they like signed him the next day. Like, so he was way off. But, but, but he was like the first like columnist Rangers beat guy to like be like Rangers are probably buying out Shattenkirk. He was the first, to his credit. It was way early too. So
wow.
that's like that's a funny little thing for me. It's like that's the spectrum. Like he could
Yes,
be way off, or he could be the guy who
right
like knows
on.
what's going on.
Yeah.
So just and I've been thinking about that since, like, reading his 180 on the whole Trouba situation the last
It
week,
is
and it's just you have to take it with a grain of salt. You
it's
really do.
so nuts how quickly that went, that 180. It was within, I think it was
Yep.
24 hours,
Yeah.
48 hours, 28, 24 hours. Like that, it was literally the last sentence of his article was the decision has been made. The first sentence of his next article, Jacob Trouba will be the captain for the foreseeable future. It was
Yep.
like you cannot write it any crazier than that.
Nope. And I swear to God, I swear to God, it had to be like June 30th, 2017. It's like Rangers are out on Shattenkirk, and he signed the next day. So
Yeah. Oh
that
my gosh.
there's you you ha- you can look it up. I swear I bet my life on it. So there's like
No,
this.
I don't. I believe you. I believe you. This I remember. I've been reading Larry Brooks articles since I was in high school. Since before I was in high school, probably. Like that's. It's like I don't even know when. I remember he floated out the idea of like a Rick Nash like haul to St. Louis, like Rick Nash for Oshie. I think it was like Jaden Schwartz, like a first round pick, and then like something else. And all of us were like, "What are you talking about? Why?"
It's hit or miss. It's
Yeah.
Larry giveth and Larry taketh, I
Oh
suppose.
my gosh. Like he was all about jury's ruthless and I'm like on board. I'm like, yeah, all right, this is good. This is good stuff. This is the way jury's got to be. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, jury feels bad and yeah, like I was wrong about this and like just a day later, just all it takes is one day and he's wrong on
Yeah.
all this stuff.
Oh yeah. Like
Crazy.
June 30th to July 2nd. That's a year in
It,
NHL contracts time. I'll tell you that.
it's like a year in Larry Brooks' time for sure. Maybe like 5 years, I don't know. Um, well, anyways, HSM, I appreciate you for coming on the show for your annual, podcast episode with me. Um, I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer, man. I'm sure I'll see you on Twitter or X, whatever you wanna call it now,
Oh, it's always
with
it's
your
Twitter to
memes.
me, baby.
Oh, yeah,
It's
it's Twitter.
it's always Twitter.
Always Twitter. Gotcha.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. These are always really fun. Next year's gonna be real fun as it stands now. Like it's like, all right, Mika, how do you cut 5 million with everyone here?
Yeah.
And like then we'll have some fun. This is just kind of like I don't know.
Yeah,
Like
we might have to set up the one for next year, like, right now.
yeah, I'm gonna like.
I gotta book you a year in advance because I know people are gonna ask for you.
Is your podcast like? Do you have visual aids? Like, I'll start making the PowerPoint right now. Like, I
Oh,
got pod.
I could put stuff on. I was starting to do that, like, on StreamYard, I could put up, like, images and GIFs and or GIFs, whatever you wanna however you wanna call it. Um, I could put it up on here for sure. I could make a visual aid for sure.
Once we have like a really fun, like things are happening, we have options. Like, oh yeah, let's do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'll keep you in the loop on that for sure. We gotta do that next time because next year's off season is gonna be crazy with like like I hope they don't like disappoint and like make it anticlimactic or whatever. Like just get it all done like during the season and it's just like all right, well we got nothing else to talk about because the Rangers figured out their salary cap situation
Yeah.
a
You
year
know what?
early.
The whole thing with this is like, it's really the nice thing about being like a salary cap nerd is like you can kind of there's a predictive value to it as far as like free agents, restricted free agents, contracts. That, but you know what? You know what? Trades can just change the landscape in a second, and we never see them coming.
Yeah.
So I really do think that there is a chance that we do see like some sort of big trade, some sort of Nash-esque, like really changing the landscape thing trade this summer. So it's like Drury missed the boat on free agency, like meaningful big dollar free agency for sure. But based on everything we've talked about, like I still am open to like some shit going down in late July and being like, oh, that changes things. Like, never mind everything that we've been saying the last 3 weeks. So that's how it goes. That really is.
I gotta start the Brady Kachuk discourse again. They just
Yeah.
traded Chikrin for a bag of pucks. And
Oh my
they
god.
traded DeBrincat for a bag of pucks as well. What they traded so many asses for two guys that played for a year, like a year or two, and like man, if that guy becomes available, I'm throwing everything there. I made a whole 20-minute video about it. It took me like weeks to edit, and then as soon as I'm about to hit post, Senators trade their pick for Linus Olmark. Of course, you couldn't script it any better than that.
Hey, I'll tell you what. If I'm an Ottawa fan and I've been like loyal to the team and I've been eating a shit sandwich for year after year after year, and then that's the return for Chychrun, I am ripping my fucking hair out.
Yeah.
Like that was such a ridiculous. Like good for Washington.
Oh my gosh, man! They made out like gangbusters in a few days. Like they got Dubois, they got Thompson, they got they got what was it, Matt Roy? They got and then they just traded for Chychrun, like
Yep.
immediately better.
I'm telling you, that's why like trades, big trades, whatever, they can really change the landscape in a very unpredictable way. So
yeah,
that I really am kind of leaving the door open in my mind to like, I'm not writing off this offseason yet. It's like Drury can make trade. Whether it'll be good or bad, we don't know. But if Drury was intent on changing the roster and he missed a chance with free agency, he has the whole summer to make a trade, and there's tradability. So.
I figured with like all the stalling on the first day that a trade was like in the works, whether that was Trouba or they were trying to go acquire a right winger. Like that was, it was really telling that they weren't going on any of these guys. Like not Tarasenko, not Sprong or Duclair or Marchessault.
Sprong's still out there.
Yeah, he is. He is. That would be a nice cheap pickup, but let's see what he had. If he's got a trade in the works, then we'll see what happens.
Especially like if you do buy out Trouba in the second window, like now you can make a trade where you are, netting like $4 million or whatever. Like there's, I mean, it sucks because it's like you could be waiting for this till like October 1st and it doesn't happen. Like, Eichel or a million other things, but
we were.
I really do think. I do feel like if Drury, if there really is fire where all the smoke is, and Drury is like this. Was this apt to like make big moves to change the roster in June? Trouba, like the Trouba thing messed him up. Like trades can still happen. Kakko can still get traded. I don't know about Trouba's tradability with all we know, but like a buyout and then trade something where Rangers are netting, the difference of his buyout. That can still happen. I really do feel like if there's ever a summer for that to happen, that this is it.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. But anyways, we're gonna wrap it up here. HSM. I appreciate you for coming on. As always, we'll do it again next year for sure. Ice Cold Takes fans, stay tuned for the next segment.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Love you, Luna.